Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. It's not really necessary that I do the screen share with this, but my OBS software, I can't figure out how to capture my camera. So when I'm using this program, I have to do screen share. And when I use Google live streaming, I can't screen share anymore because they're clamping down. Okay, here we are. Making Sense, Sam Harris, number 164. We're at 8 minutes and 52 seconds. And he's reading some little letter that he wrote to himself or something like 8 years ago after a terrorist attack. That's where we join him, and he's just about done reading the letter, and we're just going to be joining him and talking to him here.
Whenever I point out the role that religious ideology plays in atrocities of this kind, specifically the Islamic doctrines related to jihad, martyrdom, apostasy, and so forth, I am met with some version of the following. Quote, "Bad people will always do these things. Religion is nothing more than a pretext." This is an increasingly dangerous misconception to have about human violence. Here is my pick for the most terrifying and depressing phenomenon on Earth. A smart, capable, compassionate, and honorable person grows infected with ludicrous ideas about a holy book and awaiting paradise, and then becomes capable of murdering innocent people, even children.
Now, if it's Islam we're talking about, then that's going to have limited appeal, right? If Islam is being driven crazy by some other thing, then that other thing might have wider appeal. And that is indeed what we are dealing with, ladies and gentlemen. Islam has been informed by Marxism. And you can study the history of Osama bin Laden and every single other leader in the Islamo-fascist world. Every single last one of them was educated either in Paris or by Westerners in some Riyadh university in the Middle East that's run by Londoners. Every single Islamo-fascist we know of, every single last one was educated in the West and by the West. Okay? It is a problem of Marxism that we are fighting. Sam is worried about this because it's religious. But what happens when Americans start doing this? What happens when the Marxism is infecting Europe and America, not just the Muslim nations? What happens when the violent, revolutionary Marxism that we saw in the 1920s in Russia, what happens when that hits America and Europe? What's Sam going to think about that?
While in a state of religious ecstasy. Needless to say, this problem is rendered all the more terrifying and depressing because so many of us deny that it even exists. Okay, well, I think I'll stop there.
So that's the end of his letter, but now he goes into his thoughts because it used to be all these attacks were Muslims, right? And now more and more and more of them are Democrats.
Again, I wrote this 6 years ago in the aftermath of some jihadist attacks, and now I'm reading it to you in the aftermath of some mass shootings in the United States, which attest at least to the problem of gun violence here.
Really? We have a problem with gun violence. See, Sam is one of those non-essential thinkers then. He just cannot get his finger on what the real problem is. What we have a problem with is not enough people carrying enough guns. We have too many gun-free zones and too many innocent, unarmed citizens. He gunned down 9 innocent, unarmed people. Well, why were they unarmed?
As well as to our failure to make it difficult for bad people, crazy people, dangerous people to get access to guns.
How are we going to make it difficult for bad people to get hold of guns? Bad people are willing to break laws. What are we going to do? Make a law? No. The only answer is take away all the guns. And if you do that, you'll be in a situation like Britain, where they have a knife problem, and they have knife wars. And they have laws against carrying knives, and they have knife carrying inspections, and they have ordinance against knives, and they have laws against manufacturing pointy knives, and they have laws against blades that are more than 6 inches long, or 5 inches long, or 4 inches long, or 3 inches long. And it gets less and less and less. You know, in America, you can walk into any grocery store and buy an 11-inch long butcher knife. Any grocery store in America. Now, why do we not have rampant knife crime in America? Hoi polloi. And why do we have no grenade attacks compared to Sweden? There are no grenade attacks in the United States of America. Why does Sweden have grenade attacks? They do not have grenades available to purchase in Sweden. It's against the law to own grenades in Sweden. They've made it very difficult, as Sam Harris puts it. It's very, very difficult to get a grenade in Sweden. Why do they have so many grenade attacks? We need to make it difficult for people to get guns. Sam Harris is a leftist ninny idiot sometimes, isn't he? A little bit too much of the time. He's some sort of Buddhist, as Christopher Hitchens pointed out.
And it might, in fact, attest to a rise of white supremacist violence. At the time I'm recording this,
Holy shit. What kind of an effing moron is Sam Harris to buy into the left's nonsense about white supremacy, which is just scaremongering and an excuse to clamp down with government power. There are no white supremacists, there are no racists. Candace Owens is in the Republican Party. Trump said, look at my African American over here. There are no racists in the Republican Party. There are no white supremacists, all right? All white supremacists and all racists are on the left, as attested to by the fact that David Duke has more in common with Elizabeth Warren than with anybody on the right. David Duke wants a leftist society, a violent, angry, hateful, collectivist society. Collectivism based on the color of your skin. White supremacists are leftists. White supremacists are collectivists. White supremacists are against individualism. Sam Harris buys into the left-hard narrative. He cannot think for himself. He is a puppet.
it's not yet clear what's what here. But whatever's
Up to you.
true of El Paso and Dayton, two things are absolutely clear. One is that, again, we need some rational gun control.
There's no such thing. There's only gun control. There's no rational gun control. No such thing. Rational gun control is a euphemism for government gun control. And it's always, always irrational. Every single time. The only type of gun control we need is both hands on the weapon when you're firing.
The U.S. And I've written about guns. My views on guns and gun control are hard enough to parse that they resist easy summary. You can listen to the podcast or read the associated essay titled The Riddle of the Gun. I can sound very pro-gun for part of that, but the punchline you should not lose sight of is that the regulations I recommend on guns in the U.S. are more stringent than anyone on the left is calling for. So,
Amazing. Amazing. And Sam, do you know the history of Soviet Russia? Or Nazi Germany? Or Fascist Italy? Do you know the history of samurai in Japan? And the legal restrictions on carrying weapons that were present in Japan before the gun existed there? Do you know the history of that? Do you know the terror that people lived in Japan without guns available anywhere in the world before guns were invented? Do you know the terror that people lived in Japan because they weren't allowed to carry weapons? Only the samurai were allowed to carry weapons. Do you know the awful things done by samurai to innocent people? Now, if you did, then you wouldn't be so worried about getting rid of guns as if they're some sort of magical evil thing. If you do take away all the guns, and you take away all the knives like Britain, and people don't even have pointy knives more than 3 inches long anymore, then people are going to drive trucks into crowds, people are going to carry sledgehammers around and start hitting people in public with sledgehammers, and people are going to leave their propane stove turned on with their microwave running, and they're going to close the door and leave their house, and 30 minutes later it's going to blow up the entire block, and 20 people will be injured and 15 will be killed, and no guns and no knives will be necessary for these things. Driving trucks into crowds requires no guns and no knives. So I'm sorry, Sam, but this is a messy, scary world we live in, and disarming innocent people is not the answer. And that's all that gun laws do. They don't take guns away from criminals, and if they do take guns away from criminals, they leave innocent people defenseless to what the criminals then use, whatever it is. Large groups. Have you seen the video of the pizza delivery guy in England getting mobbed by a whole neighborhood? They took his money, they took his food, they robbed him in broad daylight with people videoing it. No weapons were necessary. They knew that that guy on the scooter had no knife, and they knew that he had no gun. And even if he did, there was too many of them anyway. So you just get a gang big enough. That's what we're facing. We're facing the breakdown of Western civilization. And the way to save it is to arm yourself and fight for your life, Sam. Not to disarm innocent people. Thank you for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Mr. Cropper with the Ninny, the leftist Ninny, Sam Harris. What a left-hard cuck.